All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning shir. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Shvat. To thank Mrs. Bracha Strimber for dedicating all the shir and drushos this month in memory of her husband Avraham ben Kalman Eliezer HaLevi Zichron Livracha. And to thank Ayal Sara Steinberg for dedicating all the shir and drushos this month. The zechus refuah sheleimah for Shulamis bas Susha. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the neshama will have an aliyah, the family in nechama, and the chola will have a refuah together with kol cholei Yisrael. With that, let us begin. So we have a really interesting daf today. Today's daf is Yud 10, and we are picking up Emeretz Hashem at the Mishnah. Okay, we are picking up Emeretz Hashem at the Mishnah on Yud Amud Aleph. So I will say the Mishnah reads as follows. Sorry. Okay, good. Mishnah says as follows. Amar, so again, the case is going to read as a little bit strange, but let's just read it, and then Emeretz Hashem will have the opportunity to interpret it as well. We're going to be looking a lot at the Rush today in Emeretz Hashem. So the Mishnah says as follows. Amar, Amra parazu hareini nezira im omedes. Im omedes, right? So, im omedes ani. Right? So here's the case, I will say. A person says, this cow has said that I will be a Nazir. Sounds like the cow's going to be a Nazir if she stands up. If she stands up, right? Okay, so like I said, it requires a little bit of interpretation, right? So let's take a quick look. Actually, not yet. Fine, let's read the cases first. Next case. Omer hadelas hazeh harini nezira imiftach. Similarly again, a person says, this door says that if it's opened up, it will be a Nazir. Okay, so we'll say, what do you do in this case? It feels like Naziris is not the biggest issue at hand over here. We'll say, but fine, let's discuss. So what's the halacha? Beishamai says Nazir. Beishamai says such a person is a Nazir. So Beishamai, interestingly enough, feels that this is a. First of all, Shalom Aleichem to Maishi Abramson from Eretz Yisrael. Look at that. All right, excellent. Shalom Aleichem Maishi. We did have technical difficulties this morning, I just want to tell you, but Jeremy did great. So the Gemara says as follows. The Mishnah says, Beishamai omrim Nazir. Beishamai says that you are a Nazir. Beis Hillel omrim eino Nazir. Beis Hillel says you're not a Nazir. So I will say, so fundamental machlokes Beishamai and Beis Hillel. Rabbi Yehuda says, Af kishon Beishamai, even when Beishamai said that you're a Nazir, really what they meant was as follows. Beishamai lo omrim ela ba'omer harei parazu alai karban im omed as he. Let's say, even so, I will say, this Mishnah sounds very much reminiscent of the previous Mishnah. Remember again, what happened in the previous Mishnah? Person says, Hareini Nazir, mina grogros, mina dveila. So remember again, I'm a Nazir from figs. So remember, Beishamai said it's a Nazirus, Ned Nazirus. Beis Hillel says it's not a Ned Nazirus. And Rabbi Yehuda said, no. When Beishamai says that it's a Nazirus, they didn't really mean it's a Nazirus. Rather, what do they mean? It means that the guy was making a neder not to eat figs. In this Mishnah, I will say, what's happening over here is like this. A guy seems to be telling us that the cow is talking or the door is talking, right? And the cow is saying, if I get up, I will be a Nazirah. Door says, if I'm opened, I'll be a Nazir. So once again, Beishamai says, this is a Neder Nazirus. Beis Hillel says, this is not a Neder Nazirus. And Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says, Beishamai doesn't really mean to say this is a Neder Nazirus, but rather, what he's trying to say is the cow, will be treated like a karban if it stands up. Okay, we'll say, so that's what we have. Says the Gemara, whoa, para mikamashtaya. Do cows talk? So let's get right to it, right? Let's get right to it. So I'll say, do cows talk that the Mishnah is going ahead and making this type of case? And again, the guy's making this type of declaration. So it's actually quite fascinating. The Gemara says, Amar Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama said, no, what's the case? So I'll say, this is very interesting. So here's the case. We'll call the guy Reuven. So Reuven is standing there, and there is a cow that is revutza. Revutza means literally crouching or laying down in front of him. Okay, so watch this. Va'amar, and the guy says, Kisvura parazu eina omedes. The guy says, like, we'll call Reuven a very empathic guy. He feels the cow, right? He feels the cow. He says, I feel that this cow feels that it doesn't have the ability to stand up. It's like the cow whisperer, right? In other words, I feel that this cow doesn't believe in itself enough. This cow doesn't feel that it has the ability to stand up. He goes, Shahaisa paruvutza lefanav. So the cow is laying down in front of Reuven. Va'amar, Reuven says, Kisvura parazu. This cow thinks that it doesn't have, eino medes, that it doesn't have the ability to stand up. So what happens? What does Reuven say? Hareini Nazir mibsara im amda me'eleha. I will become a Nazir. Literally again, a Nazir from its meat. So Reuven is saying, I won't eat it, or I'll become a Nazir im amda. If ultimately again the cow stands up on its own. Va'amda me'eleha. And sure enough, what happens? Rabbi says, as a result of the pep talk, right? The cow begins to believe in itself, right? And what happens? The cow stands up. Okay, so we'll say that's the case. Now, before we get to the halachic debate, let's take a look at the Rush for just a moment. See that we'll say in the left hand column, va'amar kis about 8 lines in. Va'amar kisvura parazu eina omedes kimo v'anya chashva lihishaver. So this is actually very interesting that sometimes what happens is people ascribe emotions to unemotional entities. So, for example, he's quoting over here from Sefer Yonah, right? So in Sefer Yonah, so the pasuk says, right, the storms were so intense. Va'anya chashvali shaver. The boat thought it was going to come apart. Now, the boat's not thinking anything. Right? So sometimes, again, you'll find this ascribing of emotions to unemotional or inanimate objects. So what's happening over here? He says, Lefi inyana, ein yochola la'amod. So I'll say, because what's happening? What's happening in this case? Reuven is standing there. Reuven sees a cow that is laying down in front of him. And what happens? Vainu Amar, Reuven feels, he is ascribing an emotional experience to an unemotional entity. This is assuming that animals don't have emotions, or don't have emotions as we have emotions. Okay? So what happens? So the animal is laying down, the cow is laying down in front of Reuven, and Reuven feels, ascribing those emotions that the cow feels. V'hainu amar parazu eina parazu. So Reuven says, I feel what this cow is feeling. Umasnisin she'amara adam svura parazu she'eina omedes. The cow feels like it can't get up. Va'ani omer harini nazir mibsara im omedes ani. And listen to this. And Reuven says, I'm making a declaration that I will be a nazir from its meat. Now I'll say, now what that term means by itself is not immediately clear. There's no such thing as a nazir from meat, right? But this is the declaration he's making. If the cow gets up on its own, I will be a Nazir from its meat. Harini Nazir mipsara imomedes. Va'amda me'eleha. And the cow got up on its own. So I will say now, upligi b'sham be'silba pluta dereisha me'agrova. So let's stop here for just a moment. So what Reuven is trying to do, I will say, what's Reuven's motivation? What's Reuven's goal? Right? Get the cow to stand up. I will say, what's the best way to get the cow to stand up? A promise, or talk to it, not just talk to it, but tell it, if you get up, I won't eat you. Right? That's pretty much what he's saying. If you get up, I will not eat you. Right? That's what he means when he says, Im omedes, if cow, you don't think you can get up, I'll make you a deal. If you summon the inner strength, right, and conviction to stand up on your own, I will become a Nazir from your meat. Which is what I'm saying, if you stand up, I won't eat you. So we'll say, that's what's unfolding over here in our Mishnah. That's what's unfolding. So now go to the Gemara. So it says the Gemara, here it is. V'halchu b'shama l'shitasan, or b'sil l'shitasan. Now Rabbi say, now I get it. So now again, this is the same machlokes b'shamai and b'silal as we had in the previous Mishnah. Right? So remember again, b'shamai says, therefore I'll say in this case, you're a Nazir. B'silal says, you're not a Nazir. and each goes according to his previously established reasoning and ruling. Here we go. So the Gemara, so Beishamai do Amri Minag Grogros Minad Vela Havi Nazir Hachenami. So Beishamai said in the previous sugya that when you said Harini Nazir Minag Grogros Minad Vela, what's the halacha? What's the halacha? You're a Nazir. So in this case, what are they going to say? You're a Nazir. We'll say why? Because what in Beishamai's world, what triggers your Nazir Nazirus? What triggers it? Harini Nazir. That's it. The truth is, once you say that, at the end of the day, we don't really care what you append to it. It doesn't really matter. Once you say those words, Harini Nazir, we're done. We're done. According to Beis Hillel, right? According to Beis Hillel, so I'm sorry. Good. So Beisham doing Agros Medvela Havi Nazir, Hachinami Kerem Mibsara Havi Nazir. Or Beis Hillel says no, lo Havi Nazir. Beis Hillel says you're not a Nazir. You're not a Nazir. So I'll say now, why does Beis Hillel say you're not a Nazir? So remember again, in the previous Gemara, we had a couple of different interpretations as to why it is that you're not a Nazir. But clearly, again, according to Beis Hillel, the fact that you went ahead, and even though you said Harini Nazir, but once you say afterwards what? Mina basar, from the meat, it's clear that even if you quote unquote made a neder, the Pesach to your neder, right? Pesach bitzida, it's clear that you are not accepting upon yourself a normal neder nazirus. So therefore, what the Gemara is suggesting right now is that this Mishnah is the same as the previous Mishnah, just a different case. What you have over here is a guy saying Harini Nazir, but he's attaching that neder nazirus to what? To something that has absolutely nothing to do with nazirus. So the previous Mishnah was figs. In this Mishnah, what is it? What is it? It's meat. It's meat. Beis Shammai is going to say, he said already Nazir, you're Nazir. Beis Hillel said, no, but at the end of the day, you attach to something nothing to do with nazirus, therefore you're not a Nazir. To which the Gemara said, 1 second. V'amrua Beis Shammai chadazimna. But Beis Shammai, you already said this once. In other words, we already had this. We already had this. So the Gemara said, Amar Rava, tarti tlas. So Rava says, the truth is, Rava say, there are two, and actually three cases. Because remember again, we're not touching on the door case, right? But the door case is also included. So essentially what you have over here, Rava say, are three cases where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are having the same argument. So remember again, case number 1, Hareini Nazir min agrogros min advela, right? That's case 1. Case number 2, Hareini Nazir if the cow stands up. Case 3, Harini Nazir if the door opens up. All three of the cases, Beis Shammai says, you're a Nazir. All three of the cases, Beis Hillel says, you're not a Nazir. Okay, now we'll say, what's the Avi Shaila? Why do I need three cases to teach me the same core halacha? Because we'll say, what's the bottom line halacha? Beis Shammai says that anytime you say Harini Nazir, we don't care what you append to it. Once you make that statement, you are a Nazir. Beis Hillel says we absolutely care about what you append to it. And if you append something that has nothing to do with Nazirus, then at the end of the day, you are not going to be a Nazir. I got it. Say it once. Torah to me last Mishnah. Why do you need to say it 3 times? Here you go, boss. This is fascinating. So, Amar Rava, Tarti Tlas. Rava says there are 2 cases. No, there are actually 3 cases. V'chein Tani Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia also said, Tarti Tlas. V'chein Roshia, Tarti Tlas, Utzrichi. And it was in reality, we're going to see that we need all 3 of these cases. Now, I will say, this is actually very interesting. Even though, well, let's see. We need all 3 of the cases. Why do we need all 3 of the cases? Here we go. So the Gemara says, Di'i itmar baha grogros udvela, because if we would have just illustrated the machlokes Beisham Beis Hillel in case number 1, the case of Harini Nazir minat grogros minat dvela from the figs, I would have said, Hasam hu da'amri Beisham havi Nazir, mishum de michlafan ba'anavim. Maybe it's only in the case of Hareini Nazir min agrogros min advela that halacha lamaisa Beis Shammai says you're a Nazir. Why, I will say? Because you could mix up figs, you can make up some figs and grapes. Right? In other words, that often gefen and te'ena, right? First of all, both shivas aminim, right? And lamaisa again, also like interchangeable. You could see how a person, I thought the Nazir can't eat figs just like he can't eat grapes. So because they're quote-unquote interchangeable, I would think that's the case where Beis Shammai said if you append that to the neder nazirus, ultimately, again, you're going to be a Nazir. Aval basar ba'anavim lo michlaf. But no. As we'll say, once you start saying that essentially I'm not going to be a Nazir, or which means I'm not going to eat the meat of this cow if it gets up on its own. We'll say people don't confuse meat and wine. People don't confuse meat and wine or meat and grapes. So because they're two dissimilar items, maybe even Beis Shammai would agree that in that case you do not become a Nazir. Therefore, we need the meat case to teach, the par case to teach us that what? Even in that case, Beis Shammai says you become a Nazir. Okay, v'i itmar basar, and if it would have just said the case of the cow, the case of the meat, hachudar Beis Shammai havi Nazir. Why? The bisra v'chamra. Because I would have thought maybe it's stuck in the meat case, in the cow case, our Mishnah, first case in our present day Mishnah, that Beis Shammai says you become a Nazir. Why I both say? Because interestingly enough, Nazirus prohibits wine. Right? When I say wine, you think meat. Right? So therefore, again, I understand how maybe, again, a person could just get confused between meat and wine when it comes to Nazirus. But I will say people do not get confused between figs and grapes. Therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, kamash malano, kamash malon, that even, again, according to Beis Shammai, even if you say the case of harini nazir minat grogros minat vela, you're going to become a nazir. V'i itmar hanitarti, and I will say, if I would have just said these two cases, the two cases being the grogros and the basar, I would have said hanihu dekamar Beis Shammai. This is in those cases of the grogros and the meat, where Beis Shammai says, if you say harini nazir and append the figs or the meat to it, that should become a nazir. However, aval delas eamodul beisila. I'll say, but a door, where a guy says, I'll become a nazir if the door opens. So that's crazy. That has nothing to do with nazirus, and maybe that would be a case where even Beis Shammai would agree with Beis Hillel that you do not become a nazir. Okay, therefore again, v'itana, and therefore again it has to say the case of the door. V'itana delas, and if it would have said just in the case of the door, b'ha'kami Beis Hillel, I would have said that's the case where Beis Hillel says there's no neder naziros. Ava b'hach tarti, but in the previous two cases, i.e. grogros and basar, ema moldi luhula Beis Shammai, perhaps Beis Hillel would agree with Beis Shammai that you do become a nazir. Kamash malon delo. Kamash malon said that halacha l'maisa, Beis Hillel holds in all three of the cases you do not become a nazir. Therefore, I will say, okay, so what have we just done? We've just essentially done is we've established that there seem to be three identical cases. Case number one, harini nazir min agrogros min advela. I am a nazir and I won't eat figs, dried figs, and a cake of pressed figs. Fine, that's case one. Case two, I'm just condensing case two. I'm a nazir if the cow gets up on its own. Case three, I'm a nazir if the door opens. Now I will say, in all three of these cases, Beis Shammai says, you are a nazir. In all three of these cases, Beis Hillel says, you're not a nazir. At first glance, it appears that all three cases are saying the same principle, that according to Beis Shammai, if you say Arini Nazir, we don't care what you append to it, you are a Nazir. According to Beis Hillel, if you append something that has nothing to do with Nazirus, you're not a Nazir. Therefore, isn't this repetitive? Kamash the Gemara says, no, you could not really have learned out any of these cases from the other, and therefore, again, even though they all operate on the same principle, halacha l'maisa, they are different enough that they all need to be explicitly articulated. Beis Shammai will hold in all these cases you are a nazir. Beis Hillel says you're not a nazir, but all the cases are nazir. We'll say incredible, fits together beautifully. Now, of course, the one piece that we're not dealing with in this sugya is Rabbi Yehuda. I know it's why a guy's talking to cows, right? But leaving that piece aside, we're also not talking about Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yehuda has a totally different interpretation of all of this. Where Rabbi Yehuda holds that when Beis Shammai says you're a Nazir, it doesn't really mean you're a Nazir. He means that you've made a neder prohibiting benefit from the particular mentioned item. We're leaving Rabbi Yehuda on the side right now. Okay, fine. So let's go weiter. I'm a Rava. So we'll say Rava is going to argue. So remember, up until now, we're focusing on Rami Bar Chama's interpretation of the case of the Mishnah. And how is Rami Bar Chama interpreting the Mishnah? How is he interpreting it? Reuven's standing there. We'll say, what does Reuven see in front of him? What does he see in front of him? A cow. What kind of cow? Right? What kind of lying down cow? A lying down cow who's struggling with issues of self-esteem. Right? Self-esteem, self-worth, and who fundamentally does not believe in himself. Right? Reuven sees his role as the guy who's going to inject this cow with a healthy dose of self-esteem. Right? He's going to tell the cow, I believe in you. You can do it. Right? He says this cow does not believe in his ability to get up on his own. I believe in your ability to get up on your own. V'haraya, here's what we're going to do. If you get up on your own, I won't eat you. Right? That's how he's going about that. And incredibly enough, what happens? Everyone, even cows, respond to positive reinforcement, especially if he tells someone you're not going to eat them, right? So the mice again, the cow gets up. So that's how Rabbi Bar Chama understands the case of the Mishnah. Comes along Rava disagrees. Amar Rava, Mikatani, im amda me'eleha. I don't understand. The Mishnah doesn't say anything about the cow standing up on its own, right? So remember again, Rabbi Bar Chama's entire narrative is that Reuven is saying, cow, if you stand up on your own, I will not eat you, or I'll become a Nazir from your meat. That's really the formulation. Become a Nazir from your meat. So Rava says, where it doesn't say that in the Mishnah. It doesn't say that. Mikatani im amda me'ela. Does it say that the cow got up on its own? Ella Amar Rava will say rather here. What's the case? So we'll say. So now Rava is just advancing a different interpretation of the case. Not really. I want to be clear. Not in the machlokes. The machlokes of Sham Beis Hillel is the machlokes Beisham Beis Hillel. What's that machlokes? I will say. If you say Areni Nazir and then you append something to that statement that has nothing to do with Nazirus. That's the machlokes of Sham Beis Hillel. Beisham will say you're a Nazir. Beis Hillel will say you're not a Nazir. So now the machlokes is in what's the case with the cow. So Rava says the Mishnah makes no mention of cows getting up on their own. So what's the case? Here we go. Ela Amar Rava, Kigon Shaisa Par Ravutz Elefanav. The cow was laying down in front of Ruvain. V'Amar Harei Alai Karban, and he says, I will bring a karban if this cow stands up. Right? If this cow stands up, I will bring a karban. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, if you take a look, both say, take a look at the rush. Take a look at the rush. This is now 2, 4, 5 lines up from the end of the rush. So in the wide lines, about 4 lines, but actually right in the middle. 4 lines in and 5 lines up from the bottom. So Kigon Shaisa Paravutz Lafanav Amar Harei Alai Karban, V'Hachi Perush Lemas Nisin. Svura Para She'en Yechol Lamod. So say once again, what's happening over here is the guy is projecting feelings. Reuven is projecting feelings into the cow. Right? So the cow feels that it can't get up. Then therefore what happens? She'en Yechol Lamod. V'Sova Lidar Shin Tamod Bein Me'eleha. Bein Ayedei Achirim. Shetikanis La'azara V'Yakrivua Lekarban Nazir. So this is very interesting. So what is the guy saying? The guy saying, Reuven saying, cow, you don't believe in your ability to get up. Well, here's what we're going to do. If you get up, whether you get up assisted or unassisted, I'm going to bring you as a karban. What type of karban? A karban nazir. Now, we'll say, you don't bring a cow as a karban nazir, right? But nevertheless, the Rosh goes on to explain, V'afapi she'ein maybe part of the karban chova, mikom makam hayirgilin lahaviyon tag lachasan, karbanos nedava, Olo shlam kidichsiv milvara shertasig yado kafi nidro v'hu mashlim devarev v'omer harei alai karban nazir. So it's very interesting. So halacha l'maisa, what the guy is saying is essentially, I'll bring a karban nazir if you stand up. If you stand up, whether you stand up unassisted or assisted, I'll bring a karban nazir. So let's analyze. So bishlama para bas karban. So the Gemara says, good. Bishlama para bas karbani. Ella deles bas karbani. So I understand about say because again, a para could be offered up as a karban. So in other words, the case makes sense. In other words, we'll say, understand. Right now, we're not worried about the machlokes of Sham Beis Hillel. We have that pretty much squared away. We're just trying to figure out what is the case in the Mishnah. So now Rav is suggesting, once again, Reuven standing there, sees the para struggling, says, para, if you stand up, whether assisted or unassisted, ultimately, again, I will offer you up as a karban. I'll offer you up as a karban. So I understand how that case works with a para, because the para can be offered up as a karban. How do you read that into the door case? Right? What's the door case? Ela deles bas karbani. Ela amarava. What's the case? Once more. Kigon shaisa par ravutz lafanav. The cow is laying down in front of Reuven, and what happens? Amar beis va'amar hareini nazir miyayin im lo amda. I will become a nazir from wine if it doesn't stand up. Va'amda me'eleha. And now the cow stood up on its own. On its own. So now Rabbi say, what are we going to have machlokes? And it's incredible. So Rabbi says, so this is now still Rava. So rather, Rabbi saying is like this. Reuven sees the cow laying down. He understands the cow is struggling. He says, if this cow stands up, right, I should say, I will be a nazir from wine if the cow doesn't stand up. Now Rabbi say, what happens? The cow stood up on its own. On its own. So now what's the machlokes? Here we go. Beishamai savri tarfa dahai gavra mishum ukma biadehu. So Beishamai will say this. His intention, right? The tarfei dahai gavra means the essence of his words. The essence of his words, ultimately again, is that he is going to help lift up the cow. He's going to help the cow stand up. V'hala ukma. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, he didn't help out the cow. The cow rather stood up on its own. Beis Hillel says, Mishum dereviyahu v'ha kamt. The whole point of the neder was that now the cow was laying down. Right, Reuven wanted the cow to stand up, and it didn't matter to him ultimately what? If the cow stood up assisted or unassisted. Now, I say, take a look at the top rush. The top rush now is in the right-hand column. Hareini Nazir miyayin imlo amda. The rush says, Vachi perusha. Savrua parazu she'eno omedes. So once again, I say, we're always dealing with struggling cows. So now, right, Reuven sees the cow, and again, he's infusing this mindset into the cow. The cow feels that it doesn't have the ability to stand up. Lo ayedei asav lo ayedei achirim. And the cow feels it can't stand up. Unassisted, assisted or unassisted. Va'amar hareini nazir miyayin. And now what happens? Reuven says, I will become a nazir from wine. Imlo samod. If the cow doesn't stand up. So what I will say, so what happens? The tema, so okay, I'm sorry, we're not up there yet. So I'll say, so that's the case. That's the case. And now what Rav is suggesting over here, I will say, is that what's the machlokes Yisrael? It's very interesting. What's the machlokes Yisrael? How do we interpret his words? How do we interpret his words? See, again, do we understand, like according to Beis Shammai says, that the essence ultimately was Reuven's intention to lift the cow up by his own hands, and therefore, again, when the cow goes ahead and stands up on its own, that's not what Reuven had in mind. According to Beis Hillel, no. The idea over here was what? That the cow should stand up. Right? Assisted, unassisted is absolutely irrelevant. To which the Gemara says, but 1 second. Look at the end of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda, Af kisharon Beis Shammai, lo amru ela ba'omer harei alai karban. Let's look at the end of the Mishnah. Now we're coming to Rabbi Yehuda. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? So Rabbi Yehuda interpreted Beis Shammai to mean as follows: that Reuven is not really taking on Nazir Nazirus. Even when Beis Shammai says that he's a Nazir, what he meant ultimately again is lo amru ela ba'omer harei alai karban. That ultimately again I will say what Beis Shammai meant to say was this para will be a karban. Ultimately again if it stands up. So para Mika matvis midi. Ultimately, again, I will say halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa. According to Rava. Ultimately, again, did he say? In other words, was he attaching any kedusha to the para itself? The whole point over here is that he was linking the actions of the para to an eter naziros. So, what does Rabbi Yehuda mean when he says that according to Beis Shammai, his intention was to bring the para as a karban? Ella kigon da'amar hareini nazir mibsara imlo amda. Rather, what's the case? The case is where the guy says that halacha l'maisa, I will become a nazir from its meat if it doesn't stand up. Okay? I'll become a nazir from its meat if it doesn't stand up. And what happened? Va'amda me'eleha. It stood up on its own. Beis Shammai says, Turfei dahai gavra mishum okma biyadei. Beis Shammai says the whole intention of Reuven's and Rabbi was what? Was to lift up the para on his own, right? In other words, an assisted lift. Reuven was going to. That was Reuven's entire intention. So remember again, also just to be clear, the case according to what the Gemara is suggesting over here is where the guy is saying, "I am a nazir from the meat of this cow. If it does not stand up, the cow stands up pretty quickly, right? Cow ends up standing up on its own. So now Beis Shammai holds Reuven's entire intention was to assist the cow in standing up, vaha lo ukma. And at the end of the day, the cow, Reuven did not go ahead and help it up, and therefore again, halacha l'maisa is going to be a valid naziros. Beis Hillel savri torfei dahai gavra mishum derevia. So Beis Hillel says no. His entire intention right now is the cow is laying down. His entire intention was what? To get the cow on its feet. V'hakamt. And ultimately, again, it stood up, and therefore, again, there is no neder naziros. Beis Hillel savri ilo kam tavi nazir. But 1 second. Would Beis Hillel hold it if the cow didn't get up? Ultimately, again, he wouldn't be a nazir. V'ha'amri mibsara lo havi nazir. But ultimately, again, we said in the Mishnah, according to Beis Hillel, if he says Hareini Nazir Mibsara, that does not trigger a neder Naziros. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Beis Hillel will say, again, in general, Beis Hillel is going to always hold, in these cases, what's going to be the halacha? What's going to be the halacha? Ultimately, there's no neder Naziros. That's how Beis Hillel is always going to hold in these cases. So what does it mean over here? So Rabbi Gemara says, Ella, I'm sorry. Beis Hillel is rather espousing their reasoning in accordance with Beis Shammai. And this is what he says. Lididan, according to us, in other words, according to Beis Hillel, afilu lo kam, no lo havi Nazir. So also remember again, Beis Hillel holds in all of these cases, you're not becoming a Nazir. Why are you not becoming a Nazir? I'll say, why not? Because you're appending an irrelevant statement to that neder Naziros. And whenever you do that, it fundamentally undermines the effectiveness of the Naziros. But however, Beis Hillel is saying to Beis Shammai, Lididachu, darmiso havi Nazir. But according to you, Beis Shammai, who says that you can trigger a neder Naziros from a situation like this, Odu lon mihas, at least agree with us, the torfei dahadein gavra, that the essence of this person's statement was mishum duravia, was his goal was to get the animal to stand up. Right now the animal is laying down, v'hag kam, and his intention is for the animal to get up. And it doesn't make a difference how the animal gets up. With Ruvain's help, or the animal gets up on its own, that ultimately should trigger the neder Naziro. So Beis Shammai says, no, lav torfei dahai gavra mishum ukma biadei. Beis Shammai understands, no, the essence of Ruvain's statement, we'll say, remember again, the essence of Ruvain's statement was that he was making a commitment to lift up the animal. And if the animal did not, notice, if he did not lift up the animal got up on its own, then ultimately again, that's not in conformance with his original intent, and therefore again, v'halo akman, he did not lift up the animal. So also, Sigmar is suggesting over here that although Beis Hillel will never agree that you become a Nazir under those circumstances, he's trying to argue with Beis Shammai that even when the animal gets up on its own, mission accomplished because the animal stood up. Beis Shammai says no, his intention, the mission was that Reuven should lift up the animal, and when the animal gets up on its own, that is not mission accomplished. Alright, so we'll say. So bottom line, what's the halacha l'maisa? So let's say, I will tell you something fascinating. The Rambam does not quote this case at all, which is fascinating. Now, why doesn't the Rambam quote this case at all? Because it's unnecessary. It's really unnecessary. Why, Rabbi say? Because it's the Grogros case. See, here's the interesting part. We just spent an entire block analyzing this Mishnah, but again, the Rambam says it's the same conversation. So the Rambam says that this is subsumed under the Grogros case. Therefore, Rabbi say, for our purposes, what is the halacha l'maisa? So our fundamental machlokes Beis Shammai is, as the Gemara said before. It's funny. We have three cases that are all saying the same thing. The Rambam, also remember again, the Rambam is the Yad HaChazak in the Mishnah Torah is a halacha sefer. So in halacha, you don't have to quote the same. Well, you don't quote the same case multiple times if it's the same case in the same halachic mechanism. So according to the Rambam, same case, same mechanism. Beis Shammai says whenever you say Hareini Nazir, even if you append something totally irrelevant to that statement, that is still a valid neder Naziros. So whether you say Hareini Nazir mibsara, right, or if this cow stands up, the door closes, or you say Hareini Nazir from figs and from figs, you're a Nazir. And Beis Hillel says, no. If you append something irrelevant to the neder Naziros that fundamentally undermines the effectiveness of that neder, you are not a Nazir. So we'll say, remember again from yesterday's shir, how do we paskin? Like Beis Hillel. Now we pass like Beis Hillel with a caveat. Right? What's the caveat? The caveat is we'll say that we say, whenever you say Hareini Nazir, and then you say, I'm a Nazir from something that has nothing to do with Naziros, you are not a Nazir. So you say, I'm a Nazir if from figs, not a Nazir. I'm a Nazir if from the meat of the cow when it stands up, from the door when it closes, nothing. However, what you may trigger is what? Remember again, is a neder not to go ahead and partake of that particular item. So I will say, and that could be true depending on how you phrased it in the cow and door case as well. That could trigger a neder hana. So just like by the grogros, we pass that when you say Hareini Nazir minat grogros, that you are not a Nazir, but you have effectively undertaken a neder not to get hana from figs, right? That's how the Rabban paskins. Halacha l'maisa. The same can be true depending on how you phrase this case, both by the cow, by the meat, as well as by the door. You're not becoming a Nazir, that's for sure. But you may have taken a neder not to get benefit from this cow or not to get benefit from this door. But again, that will fundamentally depend on how you ultimately phrase it. Incredible. Rabbi say, let's begin the next Mishnah, because tomorrow's a longer daf. We'll get a little bit of a head start on it. Says the Mishnah. So I'll say, so now back to some more normal cases. This is actually a very interesting case. Mozgulu asakos. So I'll say, watch this case. Watch this case. And you could very easily imagine a case like this unfolding. So here we go. Right? Ruvain is at a Su'udah. And what do? They pour Ruvain a glass of wine. Right? And what does Ruvain say? Va'amar hareini nazir mimenu. Ruvain says, I am a nazir from this glass of wine. So also a very interesting case, right? So he's not becoming a nazir, or at least he doesn't articulate a neder naziros from wine. Rather, what does he articulate? About saying neder naziros from this glass of wine. So he's a nazir. Ultimately, again, he's a nazir. He's a nazir. Fine. So we'll say that, by the way, at first glance, why does this work? So the Rosh points out, this is not a chiddush, I will say. We've actually seen this case. If a person says, I'm a nazir from grape skins, we had this case, right? I'm a nazir from grape skins. What's the halacha? You're a nazir. Which, fine. So in other words, once halacha l'maisa, you go ahead. Now remember, I want to point out, when becoming a nazir, do you need to say anything more than hareini nazir? No. But once you're saying other stuff, if you happen to mention certain parts of Naziros, that's fine. In other words, you don't have to mention everything. So if you say, I'm a Nazir from grape skins, you're a Nazir. So therefore, again, bepashtos, a person says, I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine, you're a Nazir. You're a Nazir. Watch this case. We'll say there was once a woman who was at a Suda and she was drunk. They poured her another glass of wine, va'amrar hareini nazira mimenu, and she said, I'm a nazira from this glass of wine. Amru chachamim lo niskavnu zu ela lomar harehu alai karban. So I'll say the chachamim said, she's not a nazira. Rather, what did she mean? I'll say, what was she trying to do? She realized that she needs to say when, right? She needs to, right? We're done, right? So what did she say? She said, I'm a nazir from this glass of wine. I will say, we understand, what was she really saying? That this glass of wine is asura to me like a karban. She wasn't undertaking a neder naziros, rather again, she was just trying to stop herself from drinking. Now I will say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi is on the right-hand side. Amru Chachamim, Kevan Dishikorehi, Ve'ina Zekuka L'Shtia, since ultimately, again, she's drunk, right? And it's not a good idea for her to drink anymore. Nirin Hadvarim Shulamis Kavna Zul Kabbalah Zul Zelashem Nazirus, Ela Lomar, Ye'asar Alai Kozek Karban. So Rabbi says, so ultimately, again, we understand contextually, that her intention is not to become a Nazira. Rather, what's her intention? Her intention is, I really shouldn't drink anymore, and therefore she's making this glass of wine asura to her like it's a karban. However, ve'ena asura elakos yayin zeh bilvad. And I will say, what is she asuring? She's asuring this particular cup of wine. So good. So Rabbi says the Gemara, what just happened over here? My salister. Rabbi said, just understand. You understand how the Mishnah is inherently contradictory, right? What did the Mishnah start? What's the first? Right, there are two parts of the Mishnah. Part one is a statement. What's the statement? A person says, Hareini Nazir Mikos Ya, right? They pour a cup of wine for a person. And a person says, Hareini Nazir Mimenu. I'm a Nazir from that glass of wine. I will say, what's the halacha? You're a Nazir. Then the Mishnah tells a story. There was once a woman at a party and she had a bit too much to drink. They poured her another glass of wine and she said, Hareini Nazira Mikos Zu. Right, what was Lashon? Hareini, right? Hareini Nazira Mimenu. Right, I'm a Nazir from it. We'll say, what was that? What's the result of the story? They said, she's not a Nazira, she's only answering that cup of wine. What? So the story contradicts the rule. Right? The rule is that if someone pours you a cup of wine and you say, Hareini Nazir Mimenu, from that glass, you are a Nazir. Gemara tells a story of a woman who did just that, and Chazal Paskin, she's not a Nazira, she's only answering herself to that glass of wine. What's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, so my Salistar, Amrit Ve'Sharei Ze Nazir. The first part of the Mishnah said that if a person says, I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine, then what's the halacha? He's a Nazir. He's a Nazir. Right? And then you told the story of the woman. Alma b'hayhu da'asar hayena acharina shari. But yet I will say what happens. But yet by the case of by the story, she was only she was only answering herself to that glass of wine, not undertaking an edin zeros. So both say. So which one is it? Both say the two best words, like the jackpot words in Shas, chisrei mechsera, right? Oh, so you feel it? You feel like that sense of excitement whenever you're chisrei mechsera? Like, I know, I always get the same mashal. It's like being a kid and finding the prize in the cereal box. It's like you never know what's going to happen. You never know, right? I just found Tony the Tiger's decoder ring, and I'm very excited about it. And so I say, chisrei mechsera. So, right, who knows? Gemara says, you're right, hidden treasure. So we just found something new. Vachi katani. Here it is, we'll say. Mazgulu asakos. So here it is. They poured me a cup of wine. Va'amar hareini nazir mimenu. Harei ze nazir. So we'll say, here's the rule. Someone pours me a cup of wine, and I will say, it's very important. Someone pours me a cup of wine, and what is my current state? Right? Lucid, not yet happy enough, right? So I'll say, so my current state is total lucidity. Everything is fine. So somebody pours me a cup of wine, I say, Arei zen nazir mimenu, that's an edin zeros. Right? Because again, I will say, remember, even according to Beis Hillel, who had problems with people appending things to edin zeros, here we're golden. Because what are you appending? A cup of wine. Right? So again, you are a Nazir. Now watch this. V'im shikarhu. Oh, okay. So now I will say, now there is a part 2 to this halacha. I will say, let's say a person was drunk. Now, by the way, drunk also doesn't have to mean drunk. Drunk also means you already drank a little too much already. Now it's enough. V'im shikarhu v'amar hareini nazir mimenu eino nazir. I will say, if a person was drunk, and now they poured me, let's say I was drunk, now they poured me another cup of wine, and I say, you know what, guys, Harini Nazir Meno. I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine. I'm not a Nazir. Rather, what am I doing? I will say, what am I doing? I'm prohibiting myself from drinking that cup of wine. My taima, kiman da'amar hare alai karban. Because I will say, in that case, I will say, and this is absolutely fascinating. See, I will say, here, there's a contextual reality that's unfolding. What's the contextual reality that's unfolding? I've had a bit too much to drink already, and they're still pouring me. They're still pouring me wine. So therefore, what do I say? I say, you know what? I'm a Nazir from that glass of wine. So we'll say, in that case, that is the equivalent ultimately, again, of me saying, that glass of wine is like a carbon to me. And therefore, we'll say, the only thing I'm answering is what? That glass of wine, nothing else. So we'll say, but one second. If that's what I mean to say, Harea like carbon, then I will say, what's the shayla? Just say that. Right? Why do you have to go ahead and include anything else? Just say that. To which the Gemara says, listen to this. Savar, ma'isina la'achrinon, umitzarali. So I will say, what am I concerned about? If I just say, Harea like carbon, then I will say, what are people going to do? They're going to say, fine, Silber won't drink that glass. So what are we going to do? We'll bring her another glass. So I will say the beauty of saying Harei Alai Nazir is that what? Everyone knows what can't the Nazir drink? Any glass of wine. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stop the pour, right? I'm just trying to stop. I don't want any more glasses of wine. And I'm nervous if I just make it about this glass of wine, I'm going to bring me something else. So the Gemara said, we'll say, therefore, again, I can make a statement that could just prevent people from giving me any more wine. What's that statement? Harini Nazir. And therefore, again, I will say, then the Mishnah, Maisra be'isha achas. I will say, this is the beauty of the Mishnah. So therefore, the Mishnah brings up the story to support this idea. So therefore, I will say, Allah what the Mishnah says as follows. In a regular situation where I didn't drink anything, or I'm not inebriated, and I say, they pour me a glass of wine, I say, Harini Nazir mizeh, ultimately, again, I'm a Nazir. But if I'm drunk, and I'm drunk doesn't mean drunk, but rather, again, I've already drank a lot, and they're still pouring me in, I don't want to drink anymore. And I say, Areini Nazir Mimenu. And it's clear contextually that what's my goal? To stop the wine from being poured for me In that case, also, I am not a Nazir, but rather, again, only coming to prohibit that particular glass of wine. So why do I say it like that? Because I want people to leave me alone and stop pouring me wine altogether. Osai, shkoyach. All right, Chevron, have a great day, everyone. Shkoyach, shkoyach.